Okay, let's roll. I know a lot of people are introducing bills in other committees. The Senator, yeah, at least 2 people are, and have checked in
Well,
with me
Robert
with the
Bell's here,
leader.
so we can start now.
Don't you have a bill to introduce?
I wished I did.
Mine
You
is
wish I did.
tomorrow. Oh, yes, I do. All right, everyone, welcome to the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee hearing. My name is Julie Slama. I'm from Dunbar and represent the 1st Legislative District. I serve as chair of this committee. The committee will take up bills in the order posted. Our hearing today is your public part of the legislative process. This is your opportunity to express your position on the proposed legislation before us today. The committee members will come and go during the hearing. As you can see here, we do have a few members out introducing bills right now. It's not an indication. We are not interested in the bill being heard in this committee. It's just part of the process. To better facilitate today's proceeding, I ask that you abide by the following procedures. Please silence or turn off your cell phones. Move to the front row when the bill you are planning to testify on comes up. Order of testimony will be the introducer, proponent, opponent, neutral, and then closing for the introducer. Hand your green sign-in sheet to the committee clerk when you come up to testify. Spell your name for the record before you testify. Be concise. It's my request that you limit your testimony to 3 minutes. We do run on a light system here. Green means you're good to go. Yellow means you've been through 2 minutes. You've got a minute left. And then red will be, we're going to ask that you finish your last thought. If you will not be testifying at the microphone but want to go on record as having a position on a bill being heard here today, there are gold sheets at each entrance where you may leave your name and other pertinent information. These sign-in sheets will become exhibits in the permit record at the end of today's hearing. Written materials may be distributed to committee members as exhibits only while testimony is being offered. Hand them to the page for distribution to the committee and staff when you come up to testify. We'll need 10 copies. If you have written testimony but do not have 10 copies, please raise your hand now so the page can make copies for you. To my immediate right is where committee counsel should be, and to my left at the end of the table is our esteemed committee clerk, Natalie Shunk. Committee members with us today will introduce themselves, beginning at my far right.
Kathleen Kauth, Legislative District 31 in the Millard area of Omaha.
I'm Senator Mike Jacobson. I represent District 42, which is Lincoln, McPherson, Hooker, Logan, Thomas, and much of Perkins County.
Brad Von Gillern, Legislative District 4 in West Omaha.
Fantastic. Our pages today are Maddie and Mia, and the committee will take up bills today in the following order. LB 1120, LB 873, 1136, 1135, 1409, and 1405. And with that, we'll kick off our hearing on LB 1120. Senator Hardin, welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Chairwoman Slama, and good afternoon, Senators of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. I'm Senator Brian Hardin. For the record, that is BrianHardin, and I represent the Banner, Kimball, and Scottsbluff counties of the 48th Legislative District in western Nebraska. I'm before you today to introduce LB 1120, which will require an affidavit stating the purchaser of a property is not affiliated with any foreign government or non-government person determined to be a foreign adversary. Before we discuss the contents of LB 1120, let me give you some background as to how we got here. In the 1960s and 1970s, the United States Department of Defense built 3 intercontinental ballistic missile fields. One field lies in northeast Colorado, southeast Wyoming, and the southwest corner of the Nebraska Panhandle. There are roughly 150 missile launch facilities and 15 missile alert facilities under the watch of the 90th Missile Wing at Warren Air Force Base in Cheyenne. Nebraska is home to 80 launch facilities and 9 alert facilities. They currently house the Minuteman III missile with technology that was developed when JFK was President of the United States. The federal government has decided it's time to update these facilities with the latest and greatest in the world of ICBMs. A new system known as the Sentinel missile will be the largest single project expenditure in military history. The original estimates were at $86 billion, but that number has grown to now be estimated in the hundreds of billions of dollars at least. A project this size catches people's attention. Eyes from across the world are looking at the Nebraska Panhandle. Our enemies are watching what we do, and they're trying to get an up-close look. Out west, we have seen some very interesting and eyebrow-raising things that happen. This brings us to LB 1120. We have seen purchases of land in very interesting ways by very interesting people. Some such purchases involve farmland in the country being purchased for up to 4 times the assessed value with a briefcase full of cash. Purchases like that are concerning and raise very important questions. Why would some random people with no connection to the area pay so much for land? What are they planning? And most importantly, where'd the cash come from? I brought with me a white copy amendment, which you have before you now. This white copy amendment addresses concerns we heard from stakeholders after the introduction of LB 1120. First, there were concerns with the 10-mile radius around military installations. I understand that can add a bit of complexity to buying property and knowing if a piece of property is in the restricted area or not. Working smarter and not harder, we found 31 CFR 802. This code of federal regulations addresses foreign persons involving real estate in the United States. The Defense Production Act of 1950 authorizes the Committee on Foreign Investment in the United States to review transactions involving real estate that meet specific criteria and to mitigate any risk to the national security of the United States that arises as a result of such transactions. 31 CFR 802.211 from section 1, paragraph 1 of the amendment explains exactly what real property must be protected, which says any county or other geographic area identified in connection with any military installation described in 802.227A as identified in the list as part 3 of Appendix A to this part. 802.227A is active Air Force ballistic missile fields. Part 3 of Appendix A explains exactly what land in Nebraska is affected by this. 8 Nebraska counties are identified on this federal list: Banner, Cheyenne, Dual, Hardin, Kimball, Morrill, Scottsbluff, and Sioux counties. The regulations identify all of Banner, Cheyenne, Kimball, and Scottsbluff County as being sensitive land. For the partial counties, the code is very specific. For example, in Dual County, all lands located south of Township 15 north and west of Range 43 west, using the Bureau of Land Management's Public Land Survey System. This CFR makes it very clear what land the affidavit must be submitted with. With LB 1120, whenever land identified in 31 CFR 802.211 is purchased, the purchaser shall submit an affidavit to the Register of Deeds stating that the purchaser is not affiliated with a foreign adversary of the United States. Foreign ownership of land is a very important issue in our country. Foreign adversaries owning land poses a threat to our nation and her interests. Senator DeKay has worked hard on a bill that addresses foreign ownership, but does not cover any sort of possible workarounds our enemies use, such as straw man purchases. This bill ensures that foreign adversaries cannot get into the pockets of an American citizen and get them to purchase the land for the adversary. It eliminates straw man purchases. That's what we have seen 10 of in our district. In section 2, the tax commissioner is directed to design a form for the Register of Deeds to use to help ensure that no one accidentally forgets an affidavit is needed. The intent of this is for the real estate transfer statement, Form 521, which was handed out, to be amended to add a small section asking if a foreign adversary affidavit needs to be submitted. This is another safety check to address concerns of property purchasers and the Register of Deeds, knowing if an affidavit must be submitted. The amendment also includes an example of the affidavit to be completed by the purchaser. This ensures that the affidavits will be uniform for all purchases in the sensitive areas as identified in the federal code. The military project in the Panhandle has been the issue that I have dealt with the most since taking office last year. Our people in District 48 consider it an honor to have Minuteman III in there now and Sentinel in the future in our midst. Now that the systems will be rebuilt for the 21st century, countries like China, Russia, and North Korea would very much like to move in. Every week, sometimes almost every day, I hear of another interaction near a missile facility that leaves me scratching my head. As an example, this weekend, on Friday, I spent 13 hours on the phone about these issues. On Saturday, 8 hours. On Sunday, 6 hours, as a sample. Thank you. What questions can I answer?
Thank you very much, Senator Hardin. Questions from the committee? Senator Jacobson.
I have several. First of all, thank you for the testimony and thank you for bringing the bill. I'm supportive of what you're trying to accomplish. I'm just trying to make sure I understand all the pieces and how this would all come together. You talked about transactions being done with cash. I'm kind of curious, what does the seller, what do they do with that cash?
I don't know what they do with the cash, but what I do know is the kind of typical way that it's been handled is here's $10. And so these are transactions for $10. And then when they go down to get the clerk stamp, that's when you see the rest of the money or the amount that is registered. And so you'll see a very expensive piece of property, say a $60,000 piece of property. And the transaction that immediately happens is literally a $10 amount. And then what you get is a $250,000 amount that pours in for the $60,000.
Yeah, I'm just trying to figure out, obviously, whoever ends up with $250,000 cash or whatever that number is, good luck trying to deposit that in the bank. So
it goes into evidently a mattress?
Big mattress, yeah.
Big mattress?
Probably would work, yeah.
And so,
Well, thank you. The other question, I guess, is, okay, we're talking about purchases, but how are you gonna, what about leases? Somebody comes in and says, okay, I want a 99-year lease, or I want a 20-year lease. Any restrictions there?
good question. And at this point, the interesting thing is that what we're talking about at this point is sales, because that's what we've been up against.
Right.
Interestingly, Senator Deb Fisher on a federal basis through Armed Services introduced a measure for $3.5 billion to be set aside specifically for leases as well as for land purchases anywhere near sensitive military sites.
Mhm.
Part of the challenge there was that was, as I understand, triggered by hitting the MLS. In our
Right.
situation, none of these have hit the MLS. It's been a knock at the door.
Mhm. Grandfathering, what are we gonna do with those that are already, transactions have already been consummated? Will there be any search of who the ownership is? What will be the next step there?
Another fabulous question, and we're starting to run into it sounds easy to say keep the foreigners out. Interestingly, what will happen is 3 bills that have been combined between Senator DeKay, Senator Halloran, and Senator Bostar are dealing with that reactive side of the equation. This was more of the proactive side
Gotcha.
of the equation. If I can suggest, Senator Jacobson, for anyone who's ever purchased a gun, you go in and they will ask you a question, which is really silly, you might think. And it says, do you intend to use this firearm in the commission of a felony? Well, who in their right mind would ever say yes? But it's a very important question. And the reason I point it out is because that's essentially what this bill is. The reason that firearm question is so important is because if down the road you use that firearm in the commission of a felony, you lied.
Yeah, right.
We have the tripwire here.
I have one last question, and this is kind of put my banker hat on. So the affidavit, timing of that, obviously, if you're in the middle of financing a transaction or or you'd happen to be financing a buyer on the other side and you don't have that affidavit filed, it does, and I don't know whether any title company's going to testify on this, but it does get a little interesting because title companies want to go do one last search of the records. They want to file, put all the paper, file everything, get it date stamped before they're going to release any funds.
Sure.
And that gets a little tricky when you got separate banks involved and or if there's some financing involved. And so we want to be careful, obviously, to allow the legitimate transactions to occur,
Absolutely.
but at the same time, so I don't know whether there's a timing requirement or whether that affidavit can be provided, say, to the title company a week ahead of time so they've got it so that it's not going to hold up the process. Just a thought for you.
Thank you. Our hope is to work with anyone we can to continue to make what we have and even the amendment even stronger, because we certainly have worked back and forth with title companies, real estate offices, and even the Secretary of State's office to try and check the boxes on this. And so it will continue to evolve even this year.
Well, thank you again for your work on this issue.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Additional questions from the committee? Senator Dungan.
Thank you, Chair Slama, and thank you, Senator Hardin. I agree, this is a really important issue that we should be addressing, so I appreciate you having the conversation. A couple of my questions, I guess, are kind of along the lines of more of the logistical side of things, similar to what Senator Jacobson was just getting at. So anytime that we reference a CFR with those kind of lists of foreign adversaries, I guess I get a little bit nervous insofar as we are not ourselves outlining what the parameters of the law are. And it creates this sort of dynamic concern that I have where what if, say, Congress changes CFR 15 CFR 7.4 and suddenly there's an additional foreign adversary named on there and maybe the person who is participating doesn't know that. That's my concern, I guess. Is there any worry that you have that this would potentially be like an unlawful delegation of authority to the U.S. Congress by virtue of us not outlining who those foreign adversaries are? Or do you think this would be permissible if we reference that list as part of the law?
Good question. We have wrestled with this one side of it, and that we have thought of adding to it, and yet another amendment would be to embrace OFAC, the Office of Foreign Asset Control, that once again is listed by the State Department federally. That is something that moves. It's a moving target. One challenge with that, just to speak very plainly, is you really don't find much about China on OFAC. And they're frankly our main concern here. And so another interesting thing, and we really have worked with many different states on this. Mm-hmm. As you may know, the state of Arkansas was the first state in the history of the U.S. back in October of this last year to require China to give up a piece of property. And so in a nutshell, we did talk with the Attorney General's office from Arkansas about what they developed and how. We also spoke with Wyoming, since they're paddling, water out of the same canoe we are. And they have handled it a little differently there. And we're also open to that idea, which is they allow the Wyoming legislature, is what they're proposing, to determine who the foreign threats are.
No, I appreciate that. That does answer my question.
Because you're right, over a period of coming years, whoever we may think is a hostile threat now, that will migrate.
Mm-hmm. And that's my only concern, is if we don't have control over what that potential list is, it could just create some tricky predicaments in enforcement. But I appreciate that you've clearly gone through the efforts to figure out what other states have done. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Dungan. Additional questions from the committee? Yes, Senator Von Gillern.
Thank you, Senator Slama, and thank you, Senator Hardin. Most of the questions I had have already been addressed. Just wanted to tag on a little bit of what Senator Dungan asked, and just for clarity's sake, a lot of the pushback that this has gotten from the public or just in general has been from the concept that this would preclude foreign ownership of any kind. And it does not, is my understanding. This is foreign adversaries, which is really a very short list. For the record, do you have that list with you? If I remember right, it's 5 or 6 nations.
Right. We're essentially looking at China, Russia, North Korea, Iran, and I can say you're exactly right, because frankly, Canada owns almost 900,000 acres of Nebraska farm and ranch land as it is. And we're talking about somebody who's coming here to do bad things to us potentially. The Canadians so far have been very nice neighbors who maybe we can accuse of bringing bad beer here. So,
Thank you for clarity on both those points. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Giller. And additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Hardin. Will you stick around to close?
I will.
Outstanding. With that, we'll open up proponent testimony on LB 1120. Anyone here to testify as a proponent on LB 1120? Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in opposition to LB 1120? Welcome.
Thank you. Chairwoman Slama, distinguished members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is John Cannon, Joncannon. I'm the Executive Director of NACO, which is the Nebraska Association of County Officials. We represent all 93 county governments in Nebraska. Here today in friendly, conditional, limited opposition to this bill, particularly the amendment. We actually took an original position of neutral on the green copy, but with the amendment, I think we have to go to a little bit of opposition, but I do want to get into why. First, thanks for Senator Hardin for bringing this bill. It's important when we talk about national security concerns. NACO is invested in that process. I can tell you that we have a retired Army colonel that used to work in the Pentagon that sits on the NACO board. He's been a tremendous advocate for us on a lot of different things. The National Association of Counties has been way more engaged with the Pentagon on a lot of national security issues and how local communities are interacting with our military installations. That's been something that we take very, very seriously. And for myself, I'm the son of two former career Air Force officers. I grew up in Omaha and Colorado Springs, the two places that are going to get vaporized when the birds start to fly. So I'm all about the national security aspect of this. But what I do want to talk about is the ministerial nature of recording documents in the Register of Deeds office. Registers of deeds are told explicitly through a variety of literature and guidance they receive from various oversight agencies, as well as the status under the law, that their jobs are purely ministerial. Someone presents something for recording, they're to record it, period, full stop. Now, there are certain mechanisms that we can put in place to say that, if you don't check this box, then you can't accept a real estate transfer statement of 521, for instance. And I think that's something that we would advocate for. And I think Senator Hardin is almost there with his amendment, but I just want to make sure that we get there. So for that reason, the affidavit also should not include registers of deeds signatures, mostly because of that whole notion of it seems like they're accepting something, they're a recipient. We don't want them to be accused of in any way, shape, or form of being title abstractors. We don't want them to be accused potentially of the unauthorized practice of law. People tend to get a little bent about that sort of thing. And so if we can just remove the ROD signature from the affidavit, that'd be very, very helpful. And we might recommend having the box that is on the form prescribed by the tax commissioner saying that the affidavit is not required. And so box isn't checked, then, hey, dear, please, would you please check the box for us so we know that this is a legit transaction. So the checking of the box should be on the Form 521. This bill contemplates a new form. The tax commissioner shall devise a new form for the computation of the tax. We already have that. That's the real estate transfer statement, Form 521. That's referenced in Nebraska Revised Statute Section 76-214, subsection 1. That's probably the more appropriate place to reference that. And so we would recommend that. I'd also my ears perked up when Senator Hardin had his testimony about the purchase price at 4 times the assessed value. For those of you that are on the Revenue Committee, we take that pretty seriously. That's something that we think should be looked at. I thought your question, Senator Dungan, about the delegation of powers was interesting. We talked about this a little bit in the office. We think that federalism probably makes it okay. It would be kind of weird, actually, using Senator Hardin's example, it would be kind of weird if the Nebraska Legislature said, no, by the way, the Canadians are a foreign adversary of the United States. That's probably something that's more appropriately determined by our folks at the U.S. Secretary of State's office. So that's all I have. I'm out of time. Happy to take any questions you may have.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Mr. Cannon. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Additional opponent testimony for LB 1120.
Good afternoon, Senators. I am Sam Cooper, SAM COOPER. I'm here on behalf of the Nebraska Land Title Association, which is a statewide association largely of title companies. I'm the president-elect of that association, as well as the co-chair of its legislative committee. We are testifying in opposition of LB 1120, but I liked John's term in friendly logistical opposition, I suppose. I want to make it clear we don't have any kind of political or policy objection with what Senator Hardin's trying to achieve here. We just have maybe a few technical concerns, much like NACO, that we'd like to see addressed before it gets into its final form. I understand that there's been an amendment proposed. I haven't had a chance to review that yet, though I did talk to Senator Hardin last week about it. Wanted to say thanks to Senator Hardin and Michael at his office, who've both been great. They have been receptive and working with us through this, but did have a couple things that I wanted to just get on the record. One, we are a little bit concerned, or at least members of my association are concerned about the 10-mile radius around military installations as currently written. The definition of military installation is pretty broad. And 10-mile radius, it'd be difficult for us to determine what parcels this actually applies to. Sounds like there's an amendment that maybe clears up some of that, but we'll have to reserve judgment on that until we've had time to review that. The affidavit, I understand there's a form of the affidavit. I haven't seen the final form yet, but we did have some concerns about the final form making it into the statute and being clear enough for us to use reliably. I think, again, the amendment probably addresses that, so I'll have to reserve judgment on that until I've had time to review it fully. And lastly, the Land Title Association, which is my group, is a little bit concerned about what effect, if any, the failure of an affidavit to be present where it ought to have been present would have on title to the property. So that is to say, if a deed got filed that should have had an affidavit, but it didn't have an affidavit, does any penalty for that flow straight to the grantee, or is there an effect on title? That is to say, would the conveyance be invalidated? Or would there be any other ramifications on title? Again, I think these are issues that we can work through with Senator Hardin's office. I'm hopeful we'll be able to do that, but at the time being, we still have just a few of those concerns remaining, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. Oh,
Let
Senator
me just,
Jacobson.
if I could just ask one question.
Sure.
I guess I appreciate the concerns that you've raised, and also Mr. Cannon. I think I believe too that we need to be taking steps in the right direction, but we make sure all the fine points get put together. I think obviously as a title company and someone who represents or a title agent who represents title companies who actually are insuring title, it gets a little dicey. And I think as lenders, we get a little concerned about making sure that when we get a title policy that it's binding and that we do have good title, and so we want to make sure that process works effectively and that it doesn't have a big impact on timing differences and so on. And I think you've raised good questions as it relates to trying to understand what's included in this radius, so to speak. But I'm assuming if those can get worked out, you're supportive. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, we tend not to take positions of support on political.
You're not opposed.
But yeah, I think we would remove our opposition if we get some technical matters cleaned up.
That's right. It's always a regulator term. I was giving us their non-objection. Okay.
Thank you, Senator
Thank you.
Jacobson. Senator Cal.
Thank you, Chair Slama. So if there is a problem with the title now, what happens so you sell something and the paperwork's not right, what happens now if that happens? Do you go back and fix it? Does the property revert to the original owner and they have to undo the transaction? When you mentioned that concern, I want to make sure that I understand what happens currently and how this will change that.
What to answer your question, it would depend on the exact nature of the defect, and I think that's what we're trying to get cleaned up here, right? So we'd want to know if this specific defect occurred, what would be the effect? And I think that's unclear under the current bill. Again, I think something we can easily get cleaned up as a
So it
technical matter.
just needs to be spelled out. So if that's not here, here's what happens.
Correct.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Senator
Thank you.
Jacobson.
All right, I hate to do this, but I do have one more question. What raises the question here? I'm just thinking through. It seems to me that the military is going to establish these sites.
Mhm.
So it may be secret too as to exact locations and so on. But it almost seems like from your standpoint, your role is to go in and search the record.
Correct.
And determine if there are encumbrances out there. And the county clerk's responsibility is to accept the documents for filing and file them in the order that they're received and timestamped. So it seems like the question is who's the burden on here? And it almost makes you think that there needs to be something put out there on the record that this property is subject to this restriction. Therefore, you're going to find it and you're going to know it and the lender's going to know it and all the parties involved are aware of that. So who that falls on is a good question, I think, but it seems to me that may be the best way to clean up what parcels are involved, what legal descriptions are under this new requirement and which ones are not, which I would seem to me would clean up your job a little bit.
Correct. Yeah, I think that's the heart of the issue, is just to get some real good clarity around what exact parcels this would apply to. And again, it's twofold. One is we have to search the records to make sure that past transactions have comported, but then we also have to close the current transactions. So to make sure that as we close our instant transactions that we're comporting with any statute. So it's not just researching past transactions, it's our membership closes the current ones, and we got to know exactly how to do that and which parcels we're going to require this on and which we wouldn't. Obviously, an amendment to the Form 521 would be something that would be a welcome change if that was a way that we could rely on when it's required or not, or a map or some other ways. But I think those are technical issues that we can continue to work with Senator Hardin on.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Oh, famous last words. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time. Additional opponent testimony for LB 1120. Seeing none, anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 1120? Seeing none, Senator Hardin, you're welcome to close. And as you come up, we did receive 3 proponent and 1 opponent letters for the record on LB 1120.
Thank you, and deeply appreciate everyone who's given us information. I've written down notes because we really do want to make this bill better, to make it as strong for us as we can. The realistic piece that we've looked at out in this process is we've spoken with different people from the military to clandestine, which, by the way, when I'm on the telephone for long periods of time, most of that is people from Department of Homeland Security. It's FBI, it's law enforcement, so on and so forth. That's why there's no one here to testify. They can't. So I'm here going, take my word for it. And so anyway, we really appreciate, we want to keep the process as smooth as possible. We felt like we needed to have a fiduciary involved, and the fiduciary that is involved in the process already is the title company. And so that's kind of why we went down that road. And the 521 form seemed to be one that could be modified within the arsenal of what they're already using.
Fantastic.
And try to keep it streamlined.
Great. Fantastic. Thank you very much, Senator Hardin. And am I correct in this is your personal priority bill for this session?
It is.
Okay, perfect. Senator Jacobson.
I do have one question. So I guess the title companies would love it that everybody used a title company when they purchase property, but some may choose not to and do their own search by just going to the courthouse and look through the public records and figure out what's out there. And particularly if I'm trying to do something a little nefarious, I probably would cut the title company out and do my own transaction and get the documents filed. And so that therein, it's just something you might want to think about in terms of how we cover that base, because I think as you indicated early on in your testimony, there's a lot of creative ways that things are being done. And I would expect that if you get a fiduciary involved, like a title company, then the next thing is how do we cut the title company out and still get to that transfer of title and have a solid transfer of title. So that's probably something that you maybe, if you haven't thought about, may want to look at as well.
We've literally talked with certain states who said, yeah, we've needed to put some, gold mugs up there for like poor Sam and poor John back here to keep coming back year after year, because it's going to take multiple bills, because to your point, these people are astonishingly creative. And when you go and zig, they're going to zag. And so now you need another bill to speak to that part of it. I think, and Michael can remind me, but I think this is about the 7th version of it. The drafters got real weary over the interim as we would work on this. And we tried at one point to get a few different title companies on calls and whatnot together, and they sort of ended up getting in spats with one another. And so it's not as easy of an issue to solve as we were originally hoping it would be. But
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And it almost, I guess my question to you would be, are you thinking that you would like to try to move the bill with by cutting out any objections that are legitimate objections, and then try to work through those and come back next year with another bill and
yes,
make this a multiple? Those are a lot of fun, but
unfortunately, we may have a full deck of those before the Sentinel project is completed in 10 or 12 years.
gotcha. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Senator Hardin.
Thank you.
This brings to a close our hearing on LB 1120. We will now move into our hearing on LB 873. Senator Ballard.
And then make sure you got all the dates and all the documents that file all that, date stamp it, everything's been done. Then they file the deed, and then they'll give you the title policy, you start with the title commitment and title policy. So that's the process.
All right, Senator Ballard.
Ballard.
Thank you, Chair Slama and members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. For the record, my name is Bo Ballard. That is BEAU, BALLARD, and I represent District 21 in Northwest Lincoln and Northern Lancaster County. I'm here today to introduce LB 873 on behalf of the Nebraska Land Title Association. The bill would add two payment options that would be considered good funds for the purpose of real estate transactions. Installed payment through the FedNow service of the Federal Reserve System, the instant payment through the RTP network of the Clearinghouse Payment Company. An instant payment system operates like a traditional wire transfer, except the system operates continuously. So unlike traditional wire systems that have cutoff times and delays and transfer payments, adding these two systems will allow transfers to go through instantly. Second, it would increase the amount that one party in the real estate transaction can transfer directly to another party involved in the transaction without being put into a trust account controlled by the real estate agent. The amount would increase from $500 to $5,000. There is an amendment that I believe was passed out to the committee. This would make three basic changes. The Land Title Association requested that the amount be from $5,000 be amended down to $1,500. And then the new section would add relating to the escrow language, including the two payment options, and an emergency clause would be added. I would be happy to answer any questions, but we do have testifiers following me to be more technical. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Ballard. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, you're off easy. All right, we'll now open up proponent testimony on LB 873.
Hello
Welcome
again.
back.
That was a quick turn. Again, Sam Cooper, SAMCOPER, here on behalf of Nebraska Land Title Association. And again, I'm the president-elect of that association, as well as as well as the co-chair of the legislative committee of that association. Here testifying in support of LB 873. Again, it was our bill. Thanks to Senator Ballard for introducing it. I think he did a pretty good job of giving you the quick overview. The bill proposes to add two options for electronic funds transfers, which would be permissible as use for closing funds in real estate transactions. These methods exist now. They're not widespread in their use, but they exist now. And I think that this is just an effort to make sure that our law stays ahead. And when they come into more widespread use, that they're permissible for use in the real estate transactions. And then we did also ask that the amount of non-good funds to be permissible for use in closing a real estate transaction be increased from $500 to $1,500. Again, that's just to keep up with the times. I think the $500 amount was put in back in, I think, 1995. So just keeping up with the times there. And with that, I'll end my testimony unless anyone has any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Cooper. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Jacobson.
Well, just to clarify, and I think maybe for the benefit of the committee members too, when we talk about good funds, if I'm going to offer my personal check, that would not be considered good funds. Not that it won't clear, but just telling you.
Right.
But you're essentially at your closing, you're depending on whether realtor's involved, depending on how the title company works with the realtor, somebody's got a trust account that money is deposited into. And then when you close the transaction, you get good funds. And right now, I believe cashier's checks are still listed as good funds, which is kind of a question mark at times. But most everything's done by wire transfer, or as you indicated now, FedNow, or the RTP network, which is pretty thinly traded network today. Those funds would come into your trust account, which would be good funds. Then you close the transaction and you're sending those funds right back out then to whoever the beneficiary, or you're going to basically disperse out from there. Is that pretty much the process?
Yep, you nailed it, Senator. So we take the money from the buyer, and we just have to have we just have to be very confident that those funds, do exist, are reliable, that they can be settled quickly, so that we can disperse them immediately after the seller, because we don't want to sit on them for very long.
Right.
The buyer comes in to close at say 8 a.m. The seller wants their money by say 10 a.m. So we got to make sure that we can turn that money, that the money that's coming to us is good funds under the law, so that we can rely on it and disperse it very quickly. You're correct. Yes, we don't take personal checks for that purpose, because obviously they're drawn on the individual and they take a while to clear. The cashier's checks, certified checks, things of that nature are good funds under law. We do accept those for real estate closings, mostly done by wire transfers, as you suggest, which is the FedWire system. As Senator Ballard said, that system does have a few limitations in that it has cutoff times. The processing time can be a few hours, sometimes up to a day. So these new systems, though they're not widely traded yet, to borrow your term, but though they're not widely traded yet, they are available 24/7, and the funds transfers are much closer to instantaneous than the wire system.
Yeah, and particularly with FedNow, I think is probably more utilized. And you're right, their banks are all going to have cutoff times on their wire transfers times. And of course, you don't want to forget deducting for the title insurance premium and the realtor's commissions.
Right, you got to have those as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Senator Cal.
Thank you, Chair Salama. I just have a sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Cryptocurrency, is that something that will ever, and this, we have other bills about this too, so I'm just kind of gathering information. Is that something that will become a good fund at some point? Is that something you guys use, or is that still way far out there?
We do not close in cryptocurrency. We do not accept cryptocurrency. I've seen headlines in kind of national news that'll say, "Oh, a real estate transaction closed in cryptocurrency." And all the ones that I've seen, and I guess I'm not fully brushed up on all my most current crypto news, but in all the ones I've seen, they actually convert them to US dollars right before the closing.
Got it. So they convert it and then it stops. Okay.
Right.
That's what I wanted to know. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Cal. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Cooper. Welcome, Mr. Bell.
Good afternoon. Chairwoman Slum, members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Robert M. Bell. Last name is spelled B-E-L-L. I am the Executive Director and a Registered Lobbyist for the Nebraska Insurance Federation, and I am appearing today in support of LB 873. As you know, the Nebraska Insurance Federation is the State Trade Association of Nebraska Insurance Companies. Nebraska is the domiciliary home of one of the nation's largest title insurers, First American Title Insurance Company. LB 873, as you've already heard, makes a couple of changes. Namely, it adds to the definition of good funds and expands to the definition to include certain specific types of electronic payments. Also increases the amount available to the closing agents at the time of closing. Certainly appreciate the amendment that was passed around, which adds a needed cross-reference to the Title Insurers Act, and certainly would support that and lowers the amount of flexibility originally contemplated LB 873. Obviously, those are kind of ongoing discussions on what is the best amount. For those reasons, the Nebraska Insurance Federation supports the passage of LB 873. Appreciate the opportunity to testify.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Bell.
You're welcome.
Additional proponent testimony on LB 873. Welcome, Mr. McIntosh.
Good afternoon, Chair Slama, members of the committee. My name is Ryan McIntosh, MCINTOSH, appearing before you today on behalf of the Nebraska Bankers Association in support of LB 873. I won't add too much to the conversation. Good fund statutes exist to deter fraud and provide certainty in real estate transactions for consumers. We appreciate that the Nebraska Land Title Association reached out to us over the interim to work on this bill, and we fully support its implementation. So with that, we'd ask the committee to advance LB 873.
Great, thank you very much. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Welcome, Mr. Schroep.
Chairwoman Slama, members of the committee. My name is Dexter Schrodt, DEXTERSCHRODT, President and CEO of the Nebraska Independent Community Bankers Association. I'd like to thank Senator Ballard and the Land Title Association for bringing the bill, and also, as Mr. McIntosh alluded to, for coming to us early during the interim and discussing the issue. And we were able to really hone down onto FedNow and to the RTP clearing system. As you heard, it's not much use right now, but it is good to get those statutes in place because FedNow just went live last year. So banks will be progressing eventually and be using them. So always a good idea to update the statute. So I'll stop there.
Thank you, Mr. Schroed. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Additional proponent testimony for LB 873. Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in opposition to LB 873? Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 873? And before Senator Ballard comes up with what I'm sure will be a 20-minute closing, we received no letters for the record on LB 873. Senator Ballard waives closing. That brings to an end our hearing on LB 873. We'll now kick off our hearing on LB 1136. Senator Dover, welcome to the BCI committee.
Oh, yes. Just because it's fun.
Thank you, Chairwoman Slama, and good afternoon, committee members. For the record, my name is Robert Dover, ROBERT DOVER. I represent District 19, which consists of Madison County and the southern half of Pierce County. I've introduced LB 1136 on behalf of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission. LB 1136 has two goals. First, it aligns the real estate license renewal and air and emissions insurance. Currently, someone with a real estate license has to renew insurance yearly and the license every 2 years. Aligning these two renewals makes the process less confusing and more efficient. My bill does not mandate a 2-year E&O renewal. It simply provides the option for those who want it. Secondly, this bill increases the Real Estate Commission's fining authority. The current fine is $2,500. It was set in 2009 when I was on the Real Estate Commission. Since that time, the home prices and subsequent commissions have doubled. The new fine would be $5,000. The goal behind this change is to make the penalty for violations more significant and to give an alternative to revocation and suspension of a license. Greg Lemon, Director of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission, and others will follow me with their testimony. After they have spoken, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Dover. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. We'll now open it up for proponent testimony on LB 1136. Welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chairperson Slama, members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. For the record, my name is Greg Lemon, GREGLEMON, and I am the Director of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission, appearing in support of LB 1136. And I also want to thank Senator Dover for bringing that bill on our behalf. As Senator Dover stated, pretty simple bill. The first thing it does is it allows us to go to a 2-year policy on our errors and emissions insurance, which is mandatory for all real estate licensees. We're on a 2-year renewal cycle for those real estate licensees, and we try to put that on the same cycle because if they don't have errors and emissions, it's a mandatory that they have the insurance. If they don't have it, we have to put on an inactive status. In January, we sent out about 600 letters to people who did not have to renew their license, but had to renew their E&O by certified mail. We're changing that bill that's going through this year, but nevertheless, we're trying to make it easier for everybody, reduce paperwork on that. The second one on the fines, it does increase the fining authority from $2,500 to $5,000, as noted by Senator Dover. That was passed in 2009. The average price of a transaction has pretty much doubled since then. But the intent isn't just to collect more money or be more punitive. When we negotiate settlements, when we have cases in front of us, one of the things we do is negotiate settlements. And the alternative to fining is revocation or suspension of a license. We consider a fine to be a little lighter thing, so it actually gives us more flexibility in negotiating a settlement, which might be more appropriate for the violation. With that, I would be glad to answer any questions the committee might have.
Thank you very much, Director Lemon. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today.
Thank you.
Additional proponent testimony on LB 1136.
Chairwoman Slama and members of the committee, my name is Justin Brady. I appear before you today as the registered lobbyist for the Nebraska Realtors Association in support of LB 1136. I also want to thank Senator Dover for bringing the bill. Members of the association promote professionalism and hold themselves out to be a high standard. I know it's kind of unusual for, be the person being regulated come and say, yes, please increase the fines or penalties that could be assessed against the industry. But the association looks at it as, again, holding themselves out to that higher standard, that the fines should no longer be just the cost of doing business. As the cost of real estate has gone up, take an example, you can have real estate fees that are $40,000, $50,000 on homes, let alone on businesses. It shouldn't just be, hey, a $2,500 fines cost of doing business, I'll violate the law, take my $38,000 and go home. So as Mr. Lemon talked about, it gives discretion. It's not a mandatory fine, but it gives the commission more discretion. And we also appreciate the 2-year cycle on the errors and omissions. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much. Additional proponent testimony on LB 1136. Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in opposition to LB 1136? Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 1136? Seeing none, Senator Dover, you're welcome to close. Before you waive, just for the record, there were no letters for the record on LB 1136. This brings to a close our hearing on LB 1136. We'll now kick off our hearing on LB 1135. Senator Dover, welcome back.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Salama, and good afternoon again, committee members. For the record, my name is Robert Dover, R-O-B-E-R-T-D-O-V-E-R. I represent District 19, which consists of Madison County and the southern half of Pierce County. I've introduced LB 1135 on behalf of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission. This bill is about consumer protection. I've been made aware of a practice in other states where a realty company will sign an agreement with a homeowner in exchange for cash ranging from hundreds to thousands of dollars. This agreement gives the realty company exclusive rights to sell that home for up to 40 years. These agreements are used to place a lien on the properties that prevents homeowners or the successors from transferring the property without paying a commission to the realty company or paying 3% of the home's value. These liens are written to hold future owners liable and obligated under these contracts as well. Lawsuits have been filed in other states over this predatory practice, and I believe we need to be proactive to prevent it here in Nebraska and protect our homeowners. To that end, LB 1135 has 4 goals. The bill defines the right to list home for sale agreement so that it does not include property management, farm management, or commercial agreements. The bill specifically states that engaging in such activity is an unfair trade practice under the Nebraska Real Estate License Act. The bill prohibits the filing of a record of any such listing agreement with Register of Deeds or filing a lien against the property related to the agreement. The bill makes engaging in such activities a violation of the Nebraska Deceptive Trade Practice Act, allowing parties adversely affected to file civil lawsuits for relief and the Attorney General to take action against companies or persons engaged in such activities. You also have in front of you an amendment that would strengthen and clarify the bill as well as add an emergency clause. There's also one more small change that we're making to have the bill be retroactive. As I wrap up, I want to be clear, I'm not aware of this practice taking place in Nebraska yet. However, because of the adverse impact it had in other states, I believe it's necessary to be proactive in preventing this practice here in Nebraska. Greg Lemon, Director of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission, and others will follow me for the testimony. After they have spoken, we'll be happy to answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Senator Dover. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Von Gillern.
Thank you, Senator Slammer. Senator Dover, would this prevent or are there workarounds? I know that there are instances where someone will do a pre-listing or a soft listing or a letter of intent that may and probably would have an end date or a short-term agreement to it. Would those would those options be precluded by this or?
Not that, no, I don't believe so.
Okay. I mean, if I knew that I was planning on selling my home within a certain period of time, I could enter into an agreement, a letter of intent or an agreement to agree or.
I don't know that, I mean, I don't know the letter of intent would have any strength here. I mean, either you have the listing agreement that gives the right to sell, the exclusive right to sell, you don't.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Giller and Senator Jacobson.
Maybe just to follow up to Senator Von Gillen's question, I guess my understanding of what's in the bill is that if I'm a current owner, I could enter into exactly what Senator Von Giller noted, but it would not be binding on any future owners of the property and that it would be extinguished under this bill. So it doesn't follow with the property. And in terms of an innocent buyer comes in, buys it, and all of a sudden there's a cloud out there, and particularly for the lender that might be involved in it, they could end up in a foreclosure. Now, are they required to list the property with someone that's out there? So I think that's what you're trying to eliminate, if I'm reading it right.
We're trying to make sure that people coming in don't have a letter they can climb the title with that can last, I mean, actually into perpetuity, I mean, forever. And when that property ever finally is transferred, there's a lien on the title. So basically, and I'll let actually Greg Lemon address that, I guess. But
I'm anxious for him to come up and testify. And we'll just
I know he gets a little passionate sometimes. So.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Thank you, Senator Dover. We'll now open it up for proponent testimony on LB 1135.
Sort of feel like I've been summoned, so. I hope I can still pass out paper letters and hearings and stuff.
Of course, yes.
Okay. Thank you, Chairperson Slama and members of the Banking and Commerce Insurance Committee. For the record, I'm still Greg Lemon, GREGLEMON, Director of the Nebraska Real Estate Commission, testifying in support of LB 1135. Our commission and I became aware of this practice through our membership in National Association of Real Estate Regulators that regulate the licensees. What this company does is basically, it says, I'm going to give you some money in return for the right to list your property, but there's a lot more emphasis on the I'm going to give you some money part than that. And then when you sell your property, either I'm going to list it or I'm going to take 3% on that sale. And those listings purport to be effective for 40 years. You could say, well, on the original owner, well, what's the harm there? They agreed to it. But once again, there are lawsuits in about 15 states where they say that the company is engaged in deceptive trade practices, as I said, emphasizing the I'm going to give you money part, not the I'm going to take money away from you later part. My commission said draft a bill, even though there's nobody here and, there's a lot of wrongs we could probably write about people that aren't doing things here. They have been active in 33 states. There are records of over 30,000 of these types of contracts being entered into in these other states. So we would just as soon it not happen here. So that's the reason for this legislation. The other thing we wanted to do was draft the bill so that it prohibited the conduct that we want to prohibit while making sure it doesn't prohibit, current commercial and real estate activities such as property management, such as construction liens, things like that. And I will add that I have had a chance to look at the amendments which Senator Dover presented, and those are in conformance with what we want to do with the bill. And we are in support of those as well. I would be glad to, I could ramble on about this a lot, but I would be glad to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Director Lemon. Senator Jacobson.
Well, I think I'm back to Senator Von Gillen's question now. I probably made a mistake of trying to clarify your question because I think your question was a good one. And I guess I'm still a little uncertain as to what the answer to that would be. And that was, what if you're an owner and you're doing more of a soft listing? So you'd be the current owner. I'm going to work with you and let you do some kind of a soft listing or do some kind of an agreement. Are there any prohibitions on that, or how would that work? Or can you even legally do that?
It doesn't prohibit that. One of the ways that could be done, and it could still be done under the bill, is you would basically enter into a contract with a delayed specific effective date of that listing going active versus this where it's just a future it's going to go active when you try to sell the house.
And you're comfortable that the bill has enough, that specificity in it that
Yes,
that won't be a problem.
yes. And we'll certainly work with the Realtors Association on, make sure everybody understands and we structure contracts accordingly.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Gotcha. Additional committee questions? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Director Lemon.
Thank you very much.
It's not really easy to say.
Is that the word of the day?
Specificity. Yeah,
Can you say it
it's
5
hard.
times fast?
It's a hard word.
It's got lots of syllables. Welcome back, Mr. McIntosh.
Good afternoon, Chair Slama, members of the committee. My name is Ryan McIntosh, MCI-NTOSH, appearing before you today on behalf of the Nebraska Bankers Association in support of this bill. The primary reason that the Nebraska Bankers Association is interested in this legislation is we have heard from our counterparts in other states about this very practice, so we're happy that the Real Estate Commission is taking a proactive approach to this. These sort of agreements create clouds on titles, and they purport to be in lien on properties and can certainly cause issues and have caused issues in many other states following the purchase of purchase agreements, and really just can slow down the process until they're undone. So with that, we would ask the committee to advance the bill.
Thank you, Mr. McIntosh. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much.
And if I might add to
Of
Senator
course.
Jacobson's question, if you look at the definition of these right to list agreements, they purport to bind future owners. So we're satisfied with the language as is, that it's not going to prohibit any sort of real estate contracts that are in use in Nebraska today.
Thanks for that clarification.
Thank you.
Welcome back, Mr. Brady.
Senator Slama and members of the committee, my name is Justin Brady, JUSTIN-BRADY. Here before you today as the registered lobbyist for the Nebraska Realtors Association in support of 1135. As you've already heard, we're trying to get ahead of a problem that's showing up in other states. And we thank Senator Dover and the commission for looking at this and bringing it to the association's attention that this is happening. And again, just like Mr. McIntosh said, both Senator Van Gilleren and Senator Jacobson, I point you page 5, where it talks about on line 26, that the agreement has to state that the agreement runs with the land or binds future owners. So I think to your question, no, I don't think it would affect currently what's happening, because currently what's happening is because a contract between the current owner and a
Thank you.
representative, where this actually would say it runs with the land. So
Great.
with that, I'll try to answer any other questions.
Thank you, Mr. Brady. Are there any additional questions? Seeing none, thank you very much. Additional proponents for LB 1135. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Slama and members of the committee. My name is Susan DeCamp, SUZANDECAMP, here today testifying on behalf of AARP Nebraska as the state president in support of LB 1135. I will add that I'm also a registered abstractor and title insurance agent in the state of Nebraska and own a small title company. For many senior citizens in Nebraska, their home is their most important asset and the cornerstone of their financial stability. They rely upon policymakers to safeguard them against fraud, deception, and unfair practices. Several real estate companies have been using a predatory practice to target seniors and financially insecure homeowners. These companies contact homeowners or place advertisements offering an upfront cash payment in exchange for the homeowner's signature on an agreement to use that company exclusively as a listing agent on future services when they sell their home, with a term of up to 40 years. The cash payments are typically less than $1,000, with some as low as $300. The terms of the agreement run with the land, you've heard this today already, meaning that they are binding not only upon the current property owner, but their heirs and future owners as well. These agreements are then recorded in the county where the property is located, putting a cloud on the title to the property and affecting the homeowner's ability to refinance their home to access home equity or to transfer or sell their property. To make the practice even more egregious, the agreement stipulates that the property owner must pay a penalty equal to 3% of the market value of the property if they terminate the agreement or use a different company to list the property for sale prior to the termination date. This penalty assessment is then filed as a lien on the property in the county records. In one instance, a homeowner in Nevada caught in this trap was forced to shell out $26,000 to get the lien released and close on the sale of their home. Older homeowners are more deeply affected by economic downturns, as many of them are living on a fixed income. They're particularly vulnerable to marketing techniques such as offers for quick cash, and they need extra safeguards in order to protect their assets. Any unsuspecting homeowner who is in the need of extra cash can easily fall into this trap. A perfect example would be my own mother, who is 89 years old and still lives alone in her own home, but survives solely on her Social Security income. She is always in need of extra cash just for necessities, and she would easily think that this is a great deal, not understanding the fine print and realizing what the effect would be on her home ownership. Although the Real Estate Commission is not aware of any of these agreements being recorded here in Nebraska, there could be some that exist or could reach our state in the future. The American Land Title Association has reported over 25,000 cases in 32 states nationwide since 2018. At least 21 states have introduced legislation to ban or severely limit this type of deceptive marketing and allow them to preserve, including, and 16 states have actually passed such legislation, including the neighboring states of Iowa and Colorado. So the agreements are in neighboring states. We urge you to pass LB 1135 to protect homeowners against this type of deceptive marketing and allow them to preserve their investments in their own homes. And I would just add, I'm also here on behalf of AARP because the AARP National Office has actually worked with the American Land Title Association in designing sample legislation for these states to use for this very problem. So thank you for the opportunity to comment, and thank you to Senator Dover for introducing the bill.
Thank you, Ms. DeCamp. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for being here today. Additional proponents for LB 1135. Seeing none, is anyone here to testify as an opponent to LB 1135? Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity to LB 1135? Seeing none, Senator Dover, you're welcome to close. Before you waive, we did receive one proponent letter for the record on LB 1135, and with that, we'll close out the hearing on LB 1135 and kick things off on LB 1409. Senator Bostar. Thank you, Senator Dover. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Slama, fellow members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. For the record, my name is Elliot Bostar, that's ELIOTBOSTAR, and I represent Legislative District 29. I'm here today to present Legislative Bill 1409. LB 1409 would amend existing portions of the Nebraska Condominium Act to streamline the approval process for amendments to declarations while ensuring that the rights and interests of mortgagees and beneficiaries are adequately protected. Condominium declaration is a legal document that proposes the governing rules for the condominium, including statements about an owner's association, the legal description of the condominium, and the nature and scope of the condominium. LB 1409 provides a mechanism whereby existing condominium declarations could be amended when a properly notified lender receives notice but does not respond to a requested amendment. The legislation outlines requirements for the approval process, identification of the mortgage holders, and a time frame for approval or objection to a proposed amendment. 60 days after receiving the request, the mortgage holder's failure to respond shall be deemed approval of the amendment. My office has prepared a white copy amendment for LB 1409 that makes some technical changes to the bill as agreed to by the Nebraska Bar Association and representatives of the Nebraska Bankers Association. Following me will be testifiers who will explain the aim of the bill and the proposed amendment. With that, I thank you for your time and attention this afternoon. I would urge the committee to advance legislation. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there any questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you.
We'll now open it up for proponent testimony on LB 1409. Welcome, Mr. Ruza.
Afternoon, Chair Salama, members of the Banking, Commerce, and Insurance Committee. My name is Tim Haruza, last name spelled Hruza, appearing today on behalf of the Nebraska State Bar Association. Want to start off by thanking Senator Bostar for introducing LB 1409 at our request. I am not a real estate lawyer, but I'm playing one this afternoon. So let me start by giving you just an overview of how we got here and what I'm looking at. The statute in front of you provides an optional provision in the Condominium Act that allows the creator of a condominium structure who sets that up to provide that lenders who have an interest in the condominium development can get notice of potential amendments to the declarations, right? The declarations are the governing documents, kind of like a homeowners association. That's how I think about this because I'm familiar with it. I've never done a condo, but ultimately you have the declarations that tell owners within a condominium what their rights and duties are and obligations, common spaces, those sorts of things. When you need to amend those, you can set it up however you want to. And we have an optional provision in our statutes that can provide a requirement that a lender sign off on those. So if you're lending against a property or a portion of a condo, right, within a unit or a development, you could require that that person's mortgage holder get sign off on those things. That's all fine and good. That's been the statute under the law for many years. I will tell you that I understand most lawyers don't put those provisions in their declarations when they develop a condominium anymore, not unless they're working out a structure with a bank in a very specific way or for whatever reason. What the problem that you run into, and particularly with older condominiums, is if we've got a change or a redevelopment, right, you need to subdivide a condo so that you can rebuild a portion of the complex or different things for various reasons. You send notice to a bank. The lender that owns or has a mortgage against a unit might not always be responsive, and it can cause some problems for the ability to get responsiveness to sign off on those amendments. We proposed a simple shot clock for 60 days. It's modeled after, I think, the deed of reconveyance statutes that the lawyers brought to me. After discussions with Mr. Hallstrom on behalf of the Bankers Association and Mr. McIntosh, we were able to come up with a provision that models what Florida, a state that is very well versed in condominium structures, uses to provide protection for bankers, the ability in case something goes wrong to come in and go to court and say, look, they should not have done this, but also ensures that they get proper notice and have an opportunity to either object to that or work something out with the condominium association as they move forward. So with that, the White Copy Amendment replaces the bill. It takes all the best parts of that Florida law and throws out the not best parts. But I think it's good for everybody involved and will give us a pathway forward for some of these older agreements that require lender approval as folks want to move forward in the future. So with that, I thank Senator Bostar. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Ruza. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Jacobson.
I don't know whether you've got any from the banking lobbyists who are going to testify, but I don't see them in here. So if they aren't, I guess I have a couple of questions in terms of, you've indicated Dave kind of signed off on this. I'm curious as to how the notices would be, who they'd be sent to, and how they would be sent. What method of notification would that be?
The process remains largely unchanged from the current structure and how it is done today. You'll see there in the new added language, it requires certified mail with return receipt requested. The 60 days runs from the date of receipt. So once the lawyer that sends it out would get a response from the certified mailing that says the bank has received this, you'd have 60 days from that time frame to get back with an approval or not.
And it would go to the headquarters of the bank, or
it goes to I think it refers to the deed of trust, the address that's listed on the deed of trust on record with the property.
Gotcha. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Ruza.
Thank you.
Additional proponent testimony on LB 1409. Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in opposition to LB 1409? Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in a neutral capacity on LB 1409? Senator Bostar, you're recognized close. As you come up, we did receive one proponent letter for the record on LB 1409.
Thank you, Chair Salama, members of the committee. I appreciate your attention on this matter. It's important, and of course, it is my top passion. With that, I'd be happy to answer any final questions.
Thank you, Senator Bostar. Are there any questions from the committee? See none. Thank you very
Well,
much.
that's a shame.
This brings to a close our hearing on LB 1409. Have we notified Senator Wayne's office that he's up? There you go. So as we await Senator Wayne, we will stand at ease for 5 minutes to give anybody who would like a break. It is 2:50, so we will move forward and open up the hearing on LB 1405. Welcome, Senator Wayne.
Good afternoon, Chairwoman Slama and members of the Banking Committee. My name is Justin Wayne, JUSTINWAYNE, and I represent Legislative District 13, which is North Omaha and Northeast Douglas County. LB 1405 is something different. It is not something that I've introduced before that I've seen introduced down here. The aim of this is to preserve Nebraska's limited existing housing stock for Nebraskans. This bill is not retroactive or punitive to Nebraskans in any way, and it does not stop Nebraska or mom and pop landlords from establishing themselves and attaining the American dream. If we did this, we would be the first state in the country to take this issue seriously and address the problem. It's a growing number problem across the country. And what kind of inspired is not only what happened in Omaha, but the governor's idea of banning or limiting foreign investment. So I was like, let's just take a step further and see if we can save some homes. Last year, some sources suggested that 1 out of 5 homes sold in the country were bought by investors, mostly those under 200,000. In Omaha, it went from not being a problem to all of a sudden being a huge problem. 2 years ago, an Ohio-based company called Vinebrook Homes went on and started buying tons of homes, up to 153 homes, and all of them in North Omaha. They are now one of the biggest landlords in the state. This is a company that owns 27,000 homes, and homes are now in perpetual renterships. Now imagine for instance, the effect of the communities, and think of how in St. Louis Metro, Valley Brook owns over 2,400 homes. Much of our way of building wealth in this country is based off of home ownership, and that can't happen when these out-of-state companies come in and block homes or buy them overpriced. Nebraska owned, Nebraska led, as Governor Pillen said at the State of Speech, while referring to Chinese companies buying Nebraska land. When it comes to future home ownership in Nebraska and preserving the generational wealth opportunities in our poorest communities, Wall Street should not be treated any differently. Just this session, you've heard the term East Coast money used on the floor in an old-fashioned evoke a fear when something like this was being brought up in Omaha. This is a means of preserving homeownership in Omaha, Lincoln, and other places in Nebraska. This bill will allow Nebraskans to continue to buy property and shouldn't have any effect on anyone living here except for those out-of-town corporations and investment funds. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Senator Wayne. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Kauth.
Thank you, Chair Slama. Senator Wayne, it says in your statement, it talks about foreign ownership. Is it just foreign ownership, or is it foreign to Nebraska? Like
Foreign to Nebraska.
Okay.
So out of town. So the Secretary of State calls domestic or Nebraska companies, and then foreign companies or anything out of.
That clears that up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Kauth. Senator Von Gilleren.
Yeah, thanks, Senator Wayne. I being a fellow resident of Omaha, I followed the story. I understand the problem that you're trying to work around. I'm not sure this is the answer. I'm sitting here thinking of 100 workarounds to what this very, 8-line bill says. You set up shell companies, you set up different layers of ownership, you move your domiciled base, and there's just a ton of workarounds here. Have you been approached with anybody about how and again, I understand what you're trying to do. I also, just as a pure capitalist, fundamentally oppose the idea, but again, preserving the ability of particularly moderate income, low to moderate income individuals to have the opportunity to own their homes. I understand the motivation, but I think there's some pretty serious workaround issues here.
Agreed.
Any thoughts to that?
Yeah,
You're an attorney, you know more than I do.
Right. I do think there's issues. You can just form an LLC here in Nebraska, like you said, shell company. We have yet to see at the federal level, there was the Corporate Transparency Act that was just passed and went into effect this year. Law firms are trying to grapple with what that looks like and what that means to be compliant. And so I think figuring out what that looks like will also impact any type of bill like this. This is a concept, and it's going to take a couple years to probably get it tuned out. But I think the Corporate Transparency Act at the federal level, which is trying to deal with these issues of real estate purchases by foreign countries and making sure that it's tied to American companies, and all the LLC shell games will have to be corrected. But I agree with you. This isn't perfect. It isn't ready for prime time, but it's a concept that we need to start talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Von Giller. Any additional questions from the committee? Seeing none.
I do have another hearing in another room, so I will waive closing.
Sounds
But I
great.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Have a great day. All right. We'll now open proponent testimony on LB 1405. Welcome.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Is it okay if I go ahead?
Oh, would you mind speaking just a little bit louder so the transcriber can catch you?
Can I go ahead?
Yes, go right ahead.
Good afternoon. My name is Abigail Hazard, Hazard. I'm a Lincoln resident. I live with the zip code 68503. Studying single-family homes being purchased by entities has been a long research project for my sister and me. Then I learned of LB 1405 February 2nd. I will share some statistics I have prepared from that data I found. 68508 surrounds downtown Haymarket and around the Capitol. There are 880 remaining single-family homes. 68.3% are rental. Of these rentals, 64.7% are owned by corporate entities. 26.5% are owned under an individual. I've included a bar graph including a 10-year history of homeowner versus rentals. Red equals rental, blue equals homeowner. As you can see, rentals are becoming more prevalent in recent years. I've broken it down, the rentals further to show domestic versus out-of-state owners for this zip code. 51.5% are domestic individuals. 34.4% are domestic LLC. 9% are gray, meaning they are non-transparent entities. 5.1% are clearly foreign out-of-state individuals. 68503 west and south of UNL campus, north and west of Wyuga Cemetery. There are 3,341 remaining single-family homes. 55.1% are homeowner and 14.8% are rental. That's 1,364 homes that are rental. Again, I've included a bar graph of a 10-year history. In 68508, I broke down rentals by domestic or foreign, and I haven't gotten that completed for other zip codes. I've also included some additional charts and maps for a couple other zip codes for you to review. An important note, my research does not include the numerous houses already destroyed and leveled by businesses to build up multifamily structures where single-family homes existed. Without expanding this bill, it puts domestic LLCs and sole proprietors in a better position to do more aggressive predatory buy-ups of existing affordable single-family homes. It removes foreign competition. So I propose this bill also prohibit domestic entities.
Great. Thank you very much, Ms. Hazard. I don't always ask questions, but this is really just impressive research, and I'm really grateful you brought it to the committee. What inspired you to research this issue?
I started seeing a lot of suspicious behavior of houses around me being bought up for millions of dollars when they weren't worth that.
Well, thank you. And I think we certainly admire your passion on this issue as well. I mean, this is very thorough research. Senator Cowles.
Thank you, Chair Slama. I ditto that. This is absolutely fantastic, and I hope you provided it to Senator Wayne as he goes through. I'm not as familiar with the Lincoln area. Can you tell me which parts? And I'm trying to see on the map. I see a couple of things that are the university. So around a university, there's generally more rentals. Do you notice it throughout Lancaster County, or is it really focused around the university?
Currently 68503, that one seems to be the biggest target, but it's a citywide issue, but specifically in areas where houses are under 300,000.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Cowles. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Hazard. Additional proponent testimony for LB 1405. Welcome.
And if you can keep your packet handy, I have some photos in the back part of that will refer with my testimony. My name is Kelly, Kellie Hazard, Hazard. I am a proponent of LB 1405. However, I would like to see it expand to prohibit domestic entities from purchasing single-family homes. My neighborhood, close to UNLA campus, is a prime target currently, hasn't been always in the past, for such entities. LLCs obscure their operation and intentions. Our homes are under siege by businesses engaging in predatory practices, aggressively pursuing homeowners with unsolicited lowball offers, and exploiting our most vulnerable citizens by texts, postcards, calls, letters, repeatedly. They do not stop. LLCs also outbid home buyers waiting on their closing. First-time home buyers have longer closings. They have special financing usually. They cannot compete with LLCs swooping in and outbidding with cash and quick closings. Now, if you refer back to some of those photos, in 2018, my friends sold their home on 24th Street to a young family in western Nebraska. The family personalized it and built a brand new wood privacy fence. Their dreams were shattered. Aaron Bird announced plans to build a 12-plex around Y Street. Despite community concern, Aaron Bird expanded his project, pushing out families along 24th Street, including this family who had just settled in. He completed 2 buildings totaling 36 units right there at Y Street without consideration for green space or community. He demolished existing single-family homes in pursuit of personal profits. Aaron Bird is marketing these buildings for UNL students. Keep in mind, students have had housing for decades upon decades. This shows the broader issue of single-family homes being demolished for profit and no regard for community needs or values. I am not against earning a living from having a couple rental properties as a citizen. My great aunt was wheelchair bound. She earned her entire living from 2 rental properties. A living can be earned without being gluttonous and preventing others from owning their dream home. LLC buying frenzy really began in our area in 2015. But since 2018, overbidding and excessive LLC property turnover has unjustifiably bloated our property tax assessments and thereby increased our property taxes. These companies are getting tax increment financing while struggling homeowners are paying unwarranted higher taxes because of their behavior. These increased evaluations are artificial. Affordable single-family homes still exist, but they're being held for ransom basically without any release, no ransom. Even if the Appropriations Committee approved money to build new single-family homes to replace those lost, keep in mind that LLCs will be in line to continue their abusive buy-ups. It's already being done in Lincoln. They're buying the newer build-ups. But until the legislature halts this abuse. In closing, please consider the detrimental impact that corporate buying has on our communities. Support the expansion of LB 1405 and what it will protect the American dream and the heart of our neighborhoods and ensure that homes remain in the hands of individuals and families and not faceless entities.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hazard. Are there any questions from the committee? Just thanks again for this really thorough research. We certainly appreciate your passion on this issue.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, additional proponents for LB 1405. Welcome.
Chair Slama, members of the Banking and Commerce and Insurance Committee. My name is Wayne Mortensen, Mortensen. And I'm the Executive Director of NeighborWorks Lincoln, a 38-year-old not-for-profit affordable housing developer here in the capital city. To Senator Von Gillern's earlier assertion, we work in the free market. We are capitalists. We work within the markets that allow us, but we are here testifying in support of 1405 because it starts a very important conversation about to what extent we allow outside investors to distort and deflect our local markets. You'll see here in the last 2 pages the maps of what Lincoln is currently facing as a community. Around 2008 and 2020, during those recessions, single-family housing emerged nationally as a safer investment than the bond markets. When that became the case, housing was commoditized and became just like trading any stock. Nobody that buys a stock ever really gets to go check in on the companies that they're buying the stock of. And such is the case here in Lincoln. Those outside investors, those equity investors, are solely interested in how much value they can extract from the Lincoln housing market. They have no pro formas that feature reinvestment or maintenance of these properties to the scale that's necessary. And as a result, we're seeing incredible dilapidation and housing decline in many of our neighborhoods because of these absentee landlords that have no accountability to the local communities or jurisdictions in which they operate. Beyond that, Lincoln is so much the emerging trend here in the state of Nebraska that 13% of our single family housing stock can now be classified as foreign owned per Senator Wayne's definition. What this also does is increases housing prices artificially because they're not spending money on maintenance or reinvestment. They can provide more money up front in the purchase of these properties. And so they outbid otherwise responsible landlords locally or organizations like mine that buy homes to fix them up and sell them to lower middle income homeowners for their first starter home. They frequently neglect, because these are investment properties, they frequently neglect them. They leave them vacant more often than local landlords would and poorly maintain them, which has snowball effects on the surrounding neighborhoods. If you live next to one of these units, you're not likely to put a lot more money in your facility while the home next door is slowly growing into decline. And then finally, economic instability. As fewer and fewer companies own more and more of our housing stock here in Lincoln, we will start to see things like runs on housing. During the next recession, we might have an owner from Atlanta or a landlord from Wisconsin that puts hundreds of units on the market for either the fastest seller or the highest bidder with no concern for what that's doing to our local housing market. So I appreciate the moment to share these stats with you. I will also say that 13% for single family, it's 21% of our mobile homes and 41% of our multifamily here in Lincoln that this would affect. We appreciate your time and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mortensen. Are there any questions from the committee? Senator Jacobson.
Well, I have to ask a question. I guess I look at the research and I think that although I agree this is very in-depth research, but I guess I'm kind of back to, you've indicated that you've come up with some numbers of those that actually would be affected by the bill that Senator Wayne has brought. Having owned farmland, obviously Bill Gates has come to Nebraska and has bought farmland. We've got all kinds of other investors. Farmland has been impacted by this for some time, but there was an initiative called Initiative 300 back in the 80s that was going to prevent corporate ownership of farmland, and that was ultimately ruled to be unconstitutional. How's that any different here?
Home rule has always been a situation that legislatures can address. For instance, you can't buy a property in Nebraska without having a local owner, a local owner's rep or a management company. You have to designate them to the state attorney in order to own a multifamily or rental property. To Senator, your concern, Senator Jacobson and Senator Von Gillen's concern earlier, even establishing an LLC, although super easy to do, establishes a little bit more accountability, a little bit more trust, because the Attorney General then has the ability to declare whether that LLC is in compliance with the laws of the state of Nebraska. So I think that these requirements are an important testament from the unicameral to say that we believe in free market capitalism. We believe in the ability to create opportunity in Nebraska, but we do not want nefarious actors from outside our state deflecting our markets.
I guess the follow-up to that would be, they are bringing new capital to the market. I've heard that they're buying them under market, and I'm hearing that they're bidding up the market. And then I'm hearing that they're not maintaining them, but if you don't maintain them, then don't you lose value? So why would a capitalist want to come in and buy if they weren't going to maintain them and allow the property value to decline?
Sure. Just based on the example that I've tried to present here, for instance, a 50 single family unit rental portfolio goes on the market. We would typically pay anywhere between $65,000 and $75,000 a unit to acquire those, because we're setting aside 10% of the income earned in every one of those projects every year to reinvest in those structures, so that they are not just a 1 or 5 year play, but they're a 20 or 25 year play. An outside investor, somebody from Kansas or South Dakota or wherever, what we've seen in this market is that they don't set aside the 10%. They use these units and they extract all the value they can. There's no reinvestment and maintenance only to ensure that they have renters from year to year. But there's no reinvestment. The larger reinvestment that has to happen, the structural shoring, the replacing of the roof, swapping out windows, those kinds of things that are required to keep a home in safe and sound condition for 15, 20, 25 years. When you're not when your business model is to not reinvest in those properties, you can fund the purchase at a much higher level. And when that investment is done, when you're not getting the rents that are worth your time anymore, you simply abandon the property or let it be condemned by the city, or sell it to whatever mom and pop thinks that they can make a go of it at a far reduced rate, not knowing the headache they're about to inherit.
But doesn't that happen with individuals today? And you don't have to be coming in from out of state to do that very thing. I mean, isn't that really kind of what capitalism is? That people are allowed to make investments. They have to work within the zoning requirements. They have to work within ordinance that are local ordinance that are set up by the city to maintain property. But it's hard for me to fathom that we would come in and restrict owners of property as to who they can sell their property to and how much they can sell it for. That seems hard for me to comprehend.
Sure, and I would argue it is hard to comprehend until you consider housing as critical to the economic well-being of our state. If we don't have safe, quality, affordable housing for the people of Nebraska, we don't have the amount of people that we need to drive the economy and fill the jobs that we'd like to recruit to the state. And the minute that we allow companies out of St. Louis, as Senator Wayne introduced, there's a huge conglomerate out of Arizona or Canada that each own more than 25, 30,000 single family homes across the country. The minute that we allow another market to control a natural resource that is housing in Nebraska, we have surrendered the ability for our market to thrive, because now we're dependent on out-of-state interests to keep housing affordable. It's just not going to work that way, and we're going to ultimately see a law of diminishing returns when it comes to our own economic development, because we have surrendered the ability to house our own residents, our own tenants, our own citizens to out-of-state interests that are only here to make money off of the state of Nebraska, money that which is spent in any place but the state of Nebraska because it's going out of state.
I would just, one last question. I would just say, if you take out housing and insert farmland, I would argue that farmers and ranchers across the state would be making that same argument, that they're trying to provide food, which we think would be essential to our national interest.
Sure.
But we're seeing huge prices paid for farmland. It is an investment vehicle today. farm and ranch land, has been for some time. Huge part of the problem we've got with property taxes in rural Nebraska, because you can't farm out, if you will, or ranch out the values as an operator. And so smaller operators are being squeezed out because they can't keep up with those numbers, and their taxes, property taxes are going up because of these higher values in the valuation.
Yeah, and
But at the end of the day, where do we say that capitalism ceases and we're going to take over from a socialistic standpoint and put controls on who can own what inside the state of Nebraska?
Yeah, I don't think there's anything socialist about it. I think what we're seeing now in the agricultural sector is the result of 40, 50, 60 years of agricultural land being a commodity. And so what we're trying to tell you all as housing developers and affordable housing advocates is that the same will happen with housing. If we don't get ahead of the commoditization of housing today, then we as a state will be victim to the Bill Gateses of the world. I'm struggling to remember the name of the CNN founder who owns a large chunk of Western Nebraska. We will fall victim to the same thing, but with housing, which affects in far greater number the individuals in the state that are affected. We would love nothing more than to see a continuation of our small and regional rural farm system. But in this case, what we've got, the analogy is that you've got a corporate farming conglomerate in Idaho that would come up and buy all of the small farms around North Platte and turn that into fallow land, right? And just sit on it until a higher price comes along. I don't think you would be too excited about that in your district. We're not excited about outside speculators so badly distorting our housing markets.
But with that, I think that last point though is the fact is it isn't fallow land. They're paying extraordinarily high prices and they're renting it out at market rates for rental rates. Same thing with housing. They're buying up the housing and they're renting it out. People aren't the housing's available. That's not being emptied out. The housing units are still there. The housing units are growing. It's just a matter of who owns them. Same thing with farmland. It's a matter of who owns it. Yeah, I think most farmers say they like to own the farmland because it goes up in value over the years. I think same thing with homeowners. They want to own their own home and it'll go up in value over time. That's been the American dream. I'm just kind of baffled as how we're going to come in and tell people they can't sell their home to the highest bidder, and that the highest bidder can't be the highest bidder because we've got to somehow control who can buy. That's what I'm struggling with.
Within the state of Nebraska.
Great. Thank you, Senator Jacobson. Additional questions from the committee? Seeing none. Thank you very much, Mr. Mortensen. Additional proponent testimony for LB 1405. Anyone else here to testify in support of LB 1405? Seeing none, is anyone here to testify in opposition to LB 1405? Seeing none, we'll now open it up for neutral testimony. Is anyone here to testify in a neutral position on LB 1405? Seeing none, we did receive 10 proponent letters for the record and 1 opponent letter for the record on LB 1405. Senator Wayne had previously waived disclosing, so this brings to an end our hearing on LB 1405 and our hearings for today. Thank you all very much. All right,